Well, hello, everyone. We trust you're well. We say that because we don't take that for granted. It's great to see you. So while we're expecting others to join in, I'm Kelvin Chambliss, along with my wife, Brenda, co-host of the Global Kingdom Conversation, along with Anderson Williams, who you'll hear from shortly. We also have a collaborative core team that I'd like to introduce you to that supports this Zoom call. We have Frederick Tobin from the United Kingdom, Tim Kurtz from here in the US. He's located in the South Central Michigan area. We have Ivan Gonzalez. He's also here in the States in the northwestern part of Indiana, just outside of South Bend. And Brenda and I are from Los Angeles. So those of you who are joining us for the first time, we want to welcome you to the Global Kingdom Conversation, which we consider a provocative portal. So the object of this platform is to provide leaders with a certain level of foresight, clarity, and speaking wisdom to the mature, as Anderson always likes to reference Paul from scripture. So the purpose of this conversation is not to bring back up familiar things that we've always heard, but to provoke us to think in ways that we may not have entertained before. And if we have, never really taken a deep dive into it. So we also classify this as a hard hat zone. So just picture a construction site where people are forbidden to enter certain areas without a hard hat, are prohibited, and as a safeguard against falling objects. Now, we don't expect any literal objects to fall on you. The point is that the level of conversations we are challenging status quo thinking that some may find offensive. And to that end, we make no apologies for that, but sometimes we have that. So sometimes there are doctrinal issues not aligned with the word of God in this conversation that will no doubt be challenged. So we're living in serious times, so the conversations and our solutions must be relevant to the times which we live. So we want you to think, we want you to participate by contributing. We are moving away from the talk shop model, where you listen and absorb and walk away with a good feeling about a great presentation with little or no provocation. So we also try to do our best to steer clear of persons who want to inundate their position into the conversation without listening and receiving wisdom that could come from outside of oneself, right? That may never entered into their hearts or mind to consider. So we encourage individuals to be open. So if you're ready tonight, you're ready today, you're ready this morning, let's prepare to be challenged, to be stretched, and to grow. I want to present now, no stranger to this conversation, a dear friend of mine who I have high regard for. And I'm not just throwing these words around like confetti. He's a man that has taught me from his personal sufferings at times just as equally as much as from his Zoom presentations. So welcome now, Anderson Williams, to the Global Kingdom Conversation. Andy, the mic is yours.
Thank you, Kelvin. Well, good evening, everyone. This is the first installment of the Global Kingdom Conversation. We've put the LA conversation to bed a long time ago, and we activated a US Kingdom conversation, which we've also put to bed. This platform, I think Kelvin gave us a very good description as to what this platform is all about. What I want to do is to populate this platform in such a way that we want anybody to come on the platform. We're going to open it up. We're going to open all of the doors, all of the windows, all of the access points to people, no matter where you are, no matter what is your Christian orientation, whatever is your denominational perspective. This platform will become almost like a broadcast platform. We are broadcasting truth. We will continue to be very provocative. We want to provide at least a platform to instruct leaders and give leaders a perspective as to where we believe the next frontier of divine speaking is at. We will not be the only speakers, meaning those of us that are very closely aligned on this particular platform, we will not be the only ones speaking. Kelvin did mention that there is in fact a task force or a core team that gives a certain level of steerage to this conversation. And we will meet from time to time to pray over all of the participants and those of you who join this call. We'll also get together and design what we think is the best fit for this conversation. He mentioned several of them. He mentioned Ivan out in Chicago. He mentioned Tim down in Michigan. He mentioned Frederick down in the UK. But we're going to expand that. Today, we have several persons from other areas, and I guess as the information goes out, we're going to see the numbers beginning to swell. The objective is not one where we want to see the numbers. We are not concerned about the numbers. What we want is to at least proliferate this truth as much as we can. So we know each of you on this call, each of you has a trail behind you. You have people that regard you. You have networks of your own. I know some of you on this platform have significant networks of your own. And so we are hoping that as you join this conversation, you would take the value you get and take it into your several territories on areas of influence. As I said, we're going to expand the core team and bring other persons on. Some of you have not yet been notified. Castro, you've not yet been notified, but treat this as a notice that your wisdom, we will draw upon that as best as possible so that you could bring your own insight to bear upon how we steer this conversation forward and how we could bring even more value. At the heart of what we want is to give an offering that God is well pleased with. We want to present something that really honors God and at the same time bring maximum value to all of you. So we're gonna add Castro to the steering team. Charles Opio down in Kenya. I mean, if ever I am to identify a doppelganger, maybe some of you may not be familiar with the word doppelganger. Doppelganger is a person who looks exactly like you and shares your literal DNA. I'm sure that maybe there's somebody who looks just like you, behaves just like you, thinks just like you, has your literal DNA. That's called a doppelganger. And if ever there is a doppelganger that's existent in this earth that I model myself after, that I totally regard and respect, is Charles Opio. He's down in Kenya, one of the most exceptional humans that I know. And I consider it an absolute joy having Charles as a friend and as a colleague, as a partner in the work. And so we could never have a platform like this where Charles is involved solely as a participant hearing. He has a great amount of value to bring to this platform. And other persons will be included as well. We do have competencies on all kinds of streams and all kinds of platforms. We have Dave Cropper is on the call today. Dave is an emerging prophetic voice, and his contributions are always very valid. I'm sure you must have heard Matic, who has been on this call. These are people I'm calling, and there are some of you, I may not mention your names, but we will call upon you to participate in some level of steering and giving us a sense as to where you think we should go. On top of that, what we want to do with this platform as well is to invite other voices who may not be a part of this particular grouping. They may never participate on a consistent basis. They may jump on just to contribute and we may not hear from them again. But we have to value the fact that God is speaking to all kinds of people. And some of them will have a certain line of sight that we definitely don't have. We don't in any which way seek to project the sense that we have the final say on any matter that's relative to God. We only see based on the angle of sight that God has allowed us to see. And so there are other people seated around the table of God, as it were, who has an angle of sight that we don't have. And so it is important that we make this platform available to them, and at the same time, make this platform available, or rather bring them into this particular orbit so that we could get value, and so our perspectives could be expanded and enlarged. And so we will do that to bring other voices onto this platform. Other voices who will not only speak what we would call nice biblical theories, but we may bring other voices to speak on this platform in areas of just managing your finances, areas of investing, areas maybe on stuff like insurances, if at all some of you hold to that particular view. What we want is to bring maximum value to all of us and expand us as best as we can. What we want from you, on the other hand, is nothing. All we want from you, when I say nothing, we're not asking you for any money, we're not asking you for any contribution, we're not asking you even for your punctuality, we're not even asking you for you to sit on this call for the entire 2 hours that we have it. All we ask of you is to at least value the contribution that's given to you. And the best way you can value it would be by, one, imbibing it and allowing it to at least change the landscape of your own personal life. And secondly, to bring the same value to others within your sphere. There are people who you know that will never be on this platform. Maybe it's because of the language, because we speak English here, and maybe in your world they speak, let's say, another language. And so take whatever value you have, you get here, and take it wherever you have influence. We put no copyright on anything that we say on this platform. Take it and communicate it the best you can and bring value to the people that exist within your orbit. And so that's what we ask of you. Value it, not in terms of taking it and writing a book and trying to promote yourself as being this great and exceptional man of God. What we want is for you to imbibe it and share it. And so that's what we are asking of you. Now, there's another thing that I want you to be equally aware of. Now, I did say that we want to use this platform to just broadcast the word of the Lord. It's almost like applying concepts as with a broad brush. There are many things that we say on this platform, and we will say on this platform, that we won't have the time to do the detailing, broad brush versus detailing. There's a lot of detailing that may be required from a lot of the concepts that we explore. And so in order for us to do some of the detailing, we will in fact open up other portals. And so we will introduce maybe master classes in certain areas and certain topics. And so master classes may come in different formats. It could come in the form of a mini symposium that we will do on another platform or on another day. It may come in the form of a special one-day session that is specifically designed to do some deeper diving into certain areas that we would have applied with a broad stroke. It will come maybe from jumping on other platforms and other networks in order to drill even more profoundly into certain aspects. Now, while this particular platform is completely free and there's no charge, I want to alert you in advance that where we may do some of the detailing and where we may do even a little more deeper diving, there may be a cost attached to that so that we can continue to not just enrich ourselves. At no part on this particular platform and other platforms that we have we ever involved ourselves in an effort to enrich ourselves. Almost everything that we've done on all the platforms from the time we started, wherever we started, we've never asked of anything from anybody. But what we've recognized is this, that there are several persons around the world that we want to contribute towards, invest in their operations, give towards the stability and livelihood of their own existence. And sometimes we are hamstrung in doing that as effectively as we would want to do it. And so wherever there are master classes, the master classes are not designed to enrich anybody. It is designed primarily for us to at least gather and enrich others. And so we will in fact maintain the highest level of transparency. We will in fact maintain the highest level of integrity. As I've always said in many other places, do it right or don't do it at all. And so our position is that we will do it consistently right. It will be always pure. It will always be noble. We will always be transparent. And every single thing that we do, it will be marked with not just excellence, but marked with integrity. Integrity, it will be marked with integrity. And so we just wanted to put those caveats out there today before we get into the deeper aspects of this conversation. Maybe before I get into today's conversation, it might be good for me to at least have Charles or Pio, who is on the call. Some of you don't know, you never heard this guy before, never met him before. This, as I said, this is my doppelganger. He looks like me, he thinks like me in all kinds of different ways. And I literally love this brother. I love who he is. I love his family. I think he has the most exceptional family. I think he has the most remarkable wife. He has the most remarkable children, and he's building an exceptional work down in the city of Nairobi, Kenya. Charles, let me ask you to jump on the call and say a hi, a hello, and make yourself known to the Garvey company here. Opio, out of Kenya. You there, Charles? I don't think I was talking to a wall. Yeah, unmute my.
Yes, Andy, I'm right
okay,
here,
cool.
man. Thank you, Andy, and thank you, everybody. We were always part of the conversation. It just happened that it ran concurrent with our other conversation here in Kenya and East Africa, but we always, thank you, Kelvin, out of US, making sure we always got a catch up. So we are with everybody that goes on, and I'm glad that we now have this opportunity to take this on a wider scale. I'm sure some of our family are also on this call, but hello, everybody, and it's a pleasure to be part of this family. And just a shout out to all the guys. I mean, it's good to see guys I haven't talked to in a while or seen in a while, Kelvin, Frederick, and Dave. I know you've just come out of Africa, Congo, and had some amazing activity there. We couldn't get together, but hey, things are going to unfold. So hello, and Andy, thank you for introducing me to the group, yes.
Excellent, excellent. Well, David Castro, your voice is by no means a strange voice on this platform. Your contributions on this platform is always welcome. I don't know if I caught you by surprise in saying that, listen, I need to be closer to you, brother. You have a value that I desperately and urgently need. You have a sight that I need. And so I would gladly, absolutely enjoy you standing with us to build this platform even more effectively. So let me ask you, David, before we know your contributions, you normally jump in and contribute. So David, let me give you the mic for a few seconds just to kind of introduce yourself to the Garvey company. You don't need introductions, but still, say something, man, David.
Thank you, Andy. I consider it a tremendous honor to be able to serve. I guess the greatest calling that we all have is to serve. And when I can serve with a group of men and women as there are in this conversation, and with the spirit and with the focus that we have in this conversation, I consider this a great, great honor. So I'm here to serve. I'm honored that you would ask me and that others would be willing to hear what the Lord has given us in the last 50 years of serving him. And I look forward to the future. I'd like to welcome today to the conversation a very close friend, someone that I've been in relationship with for many, many, many years. He's a kingdom-minded man. And so I invited him to this call, and that is Dr. Edgar Gonzalez. He lives in Tulsa, Oklahoma, pastors a local congregation, a graduate of Oral Roberts University, teaches there at Oral Roberts. And so we welcome him also today to this call, and I introduce him to the rest of you today. And once again, it's an honor to serve you. I look forward to just being a vessel. I always say I'm just the mule that God chose, and every time I'm just the jaw.
Good. Oh man, excellent. Excellent as always. Listen, guys, let me do this as well. I think we already hit a nerve, and I'm going to keep striking in this area. Frederick, listen, Frederick, Tobin, listen, guys, we've done some stuff together on the US Kingdom conversation. I heard Frederick sometime last year or something of the sort out in a meeting we had out in Nigeria. This brother has an invaluable contribution to make to the body of Christ globally. His perspective and his line of sight has enlarged me and has broadened my own horizons. And so it's an honor to work with Frederick on this platform and other platforms. And we'll have conversations going forward to see how there's a lot of things that Frederick is doing. I really encourage you, those of you who has access to like Frederick's information, maybe you signed up on his websites, etc., utilize it, maximize it. So let me ask Frederick just to kind of say a couple things, jump in, make a couple comments, rebuke who needs to be rebuked, encourage who needs to be encouraged. So, okay, Fred. Yes, Fred.
Oh no! Hello, everyone. Obviously, always excited to be on the call, especially just to see the way that the Lord is connecting us, not just in terms of regionally, but globally. And it's going to be, I think the next few years are going to be really exciting. I'm very much interested in how we can leverage Christ's anointing throughout the earth, how we can pull resources together, and how we can really build strong commonwealth, because I think the ecclesia is going to need it, frankly, in terms of what's coming up. And I think that it's going to be really exciting. So, you know, for me, the closer we get to realizing the Lord's vision of his kingdom on earth amongst his people as citizens, the happier I am. So it's great to be on the call with kingdom-minded folk.
Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. Is Ivan on the call? I'm not seeing, I'm stroking through those who are here, and I'm not seeing Ivan, unless of course he logged in on a different name or something. Is Ivan here? Ivan out of Chicago. Is Ivan there? I don't think he is. I don't think I'm seeing Tim Kurtz as well. Is Tim, are you there? I'm not seeing Tim either.
No.
Tim is not there either. So I guess some of these guys are going to join the platform maybe beginning next week or later. Let me ask Dave Cropper. I mean, I'm going to have Cropper jump in at the end of my presentation today. But let me ask Cropper just to say a quick hello. Cropper just came from a whirlwind travel exercise. I mean, I aspire to be like him one of these days.
Whatever.
He went down into South Africa, then into Congo. I mean, listen, brother, when I grow up, I want to be like you. So, Cropper, the mic is yours. Say hi to the guys on there who are here before you go forward.
Those of us that know better would stand corrected by these assertions. Anderson, so great to see you again. Just great to be here. Kelvin Chambliss, brother of my heart, I hold you in high esteem. And I'm just praying that God will just continue to give you long life and steerage in the things that are before you and the things that you handle, you and your wife, Brenda. To the community, I am just overwhelmed by the fact that, you know, that the Lord is continuing to dovetail work. He's causing us to be united on different fronts. And really and truly, the kingdom of God is advancing. What looks like shallowness in some quarters and confusion in another quarter is really the shaking of God to cause that which is pure to arise. And I only see that from our efforts of distillation and just sitting before the word, that will cause us to just move in the direction that God has called us to move. So I'm just honored to be here to contribute in whichever way. God has definitely preserved Anderson's life for this time, and we are very grateful. So yeah, just glad to be here and looking forward to share with you all some of my updates later on.
Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. Now, the few persons I've asked to share, just to say hi, they are by no means the esoteric grouping. I mean, we don't subscribe to anything that is esoteric on this platform. You know what esoteric speaks to? Meaning a very small group at the top that seem to be the possessors of all the wisdom and all the ideas. We don't believe in that concept at all. And so when I mentioned that we're going to open up to hear from many of you, I know that there are all kinds of competence on this platform. I know PV down in Finland has a lot of stuff going on. So every now and again, we may invite PV into one of our closed group conversation that her wisdom could come to bear upon some of the things that we are doing and saying. We have other people on this platform. Lincoln Robinson in Trinidad. Lincoln is a guy that has really a very strong perspective on areas of deliverance and so on. There are areas that I may be blind to or not very, very conversant in, but not only on a matter that they are competent upon, but also just to hear them and to hear what they see in terms of the conversation going forward. And so I will call upon several of you from time to time just to participate in the core group conversation, just to participate, just to jump in and say hi, so that we can hear your perspective on how we can really, really collaborate on a deeper and more profound level. So that is it for introductory comments today. It's good to see you. Shabbat, you're on the call today. Good to see you, man. Let me unmute your mic, Shabbat. I wanted to call you yesterday, as a matter of fact. I was thinking about you and your wife yesterday, and I was praying for you all. So good to see you here. Shabbat, just kind of say a quick hello. Before you say anything, Shabbat, one of the things I'm really happy about, extremely elated about, is to see how God, despite the circumstances that you're in, how God is creating platforms and areas of opportunity for you to speak. I was listening to some of your presentations recently that you did on another platform, which I found to be absolutely on point. I commend you for that. I celebrate the fact that God is giving you the word of the Lord. And so let me ask you to jump in here and say a quick hello and hi to the guys here.
All right, thanks a lot, Andy. Hello to my global family. We are down in Suriname, South America. Looking forward to journeying with you and with each other during this Kairos moment. So open arms, open heart, and eyes fixed onto the road ahead. Blessings all.
Excellent. Excellent. I see Ivan jumped in. Ivan, we were calling on you earlier. Good to see you on the call here, Ivan. We were talking about all of the guys who are serving as the core team, and we kind of had everybody who was on to say a quick hello. Guys, I see Ivan, is your mic unmuted because you are ready to say hi?
Sure, I'd say hi. This is Ivan. I'm in in Indiana, loving just how God is orchestrating all of our relationships and to go deeper with one another, to see his kingdom manifest wherever we are. So welcome, everyone.
Beautiful, beautiful. All right, that's Ivan. Guys, my system has just gone awry, so I need to log out and log back in. While I do that, can I ask Kelvin, can you just hold the conversation for about 3 minutes? I need to log out and log back in because my whole system just froze on me. So Kelvin, let's hold it until I come back on, all right?
Sure. It's good to see Kelvin Muhammad. Kelvin Muhammad, would you greet us? He's a dear friend of this call and from going way back to the LA conversation. Kelvin Muhammad, it's good to see you. Would you please greet us today?
Well, hello, everyone. It is indeed a pleasure and a privilege to be here and to see familiar faces, and even those who may be new to the conversation. This has been a portal of challenging our minds and introducing us to the truth of the kingdom of God. It is indeed a real pleasure to be here and a privilege. And so I greet everyone from Trinidad and Tobago, and we're continuing to go forward, expanding minds and challenging our faith so that we may see more of him. So blessings to everyone. Blessings to you, Kelvin.
Yes, thank you. It's something about Kelvin's deep, rich voice that just kind of blankets you, man. You know, you feel good once hearing him. He did a great presentation on forgiveness on the 31st. If you were able to hear that, I'm sure you benefited from it. Andy, if you're back up, it's over to you.
I'm back up. Hi guys, we're going to jump into this. I don't know if some of you are aware that the end of a legacy has just come upon us. The end of a dynasty has just come upon us. The Queen of England just passed on. That has all kinds of symbolic issues attached to it, but that's another conversation. So those of you who have some degree of allegiance to the Queen, she just basically passed on at the age of 96. So that's the end of a real dynasty. So let's get into this conversation today. Now, I really wanted today to jump into the whole issue of dominion. We've been talking about this, but I really wanted to get into it today. But the more I kind of structured my presentation, is the more I saw the need just for us to complete some things we started talking about in terms of sight, accurate sight into kingdom purpose. And so what I would do, I would leave that conversation to next week, where we really begin to drill even more profoundly into the issues of kingdom dominion. You have heard me say this before, that our wrong understanding of kingdom dominion has resulted in all kinds of catastrophic initiatives across the world. It is a distorted perspective of dominion theology and dominion concepts that has resulted in things like the Crusades. It has resulted in things like the conquistadors. It has actually resulted in things like the Holocaust. It has had a negative impact upon all kinds of stuff. And today, across the world, we have issues with Christian nationalists who are of the view that we have to take over all kinds of maybe politics and other kinds of initiatives. Next week's conversation, we're going to drill into those issues. And in that conversation, we're going to talk about issues like the distinction between monarchy versus diarchy. That's a very important word, monarchy versus diarchy. Diarchy represents a system of kingdom authority that we've not seen very much on the earth. David demonstrated it, and God basically presents that to us as an option. So we'll talk about that next week. The other thing we'll talk about next week is the distinction between exousia and dunamis. Those two words have sometimes been used concurrently and interchangeably, but they are two separate words altogether in terms of exercising dominion and expressing the authority that God has ordained for us. There must be clear distinction between those two words. The other thing we'll talk about is
please forgive me. We're not seeing it now. We're starting to see your screen. We weren't seeing it. Okay, very well.
We didn't activate. I didn't activate it. I knew that. I didn't put it on. Yeah. So we talk about the distinction between monarchy versus diarchy. We talk about the difference between dunamis versus exousia. We're going to drill into that word in Genesis chapter 1, where God said, let them have dominion. We're going to explain and look at the different nuance between that is inside of that particular Hebrew concept, what is deeply embedded inside of that. And then we're going to explore a very important concept, whether God wants us to exert kingdom influence on given structures in the earth, or does he want us to kind of create alternative systems to what is existent in the earth? And in doing that, we're going to explore something quite interesting. Most of us may not have explored issues of what is known as cosmocracy. Cosmocracy, the devil is known as a cosmocrat. When Jesus talks about he is the ruler of this world, a lot of the systems that are existent in this world, they are not God ordained, but they have been structured and built by the devil themselves. And so it has cosmocracy that exists in the earth. And there are systems that the devil has built in the earth in order to create the world to work in a certain way. Now, what happens in most circles is that when we talk about taking over education, we are trying to almost like take over a system that the devil has instituted. Let's take over economics. We are again trying to take over a system that the devil has instituted. Let's take over politics. Again, we are trying to exercise dominion over a system that the cosmocrat has instituted. And this is the example we talk about next week. You'd realize that when Nebuchadnezzar saw this image, and then he saw the rock cut out without human hands, the rock did not make any attempt to kind of influence all of the different systems that were there. The rock basically removed those systems and built what we can call an alternative to those systems. And until believers begin to see the kingdom correctly, we will continue to try to exercise certain level of rulership over systems that are already there. I'm sure you are familiar with the cuckoo bird. And today we talk about the cuckoo bird as being a person who kind of crazy. But one of the things about the cuckoo bird is some things that we have done within the church. The cuckoo bird always seeks to go and lay its eggs in somebody else's nest. And I wonder whether what we call kingdom really is nothing more than a cuckoo exercise. Pun is deliberately intended there, where we are engaged in a cuckoo kind of exercise, trying to lay our kingdom eggs inside of demonic systems that have been built not by God and initiated by God, but systems that the cosmocrat, the reason why the devil said to Jesus, you come, bow down before me, and I'll give you authority over all of these kingdoms. That's a cosmocratic conversation. Jesus did not basically respond to that. What we are trying to do in the name of kingdom is trying to lay our kingdom eggs inside of nests that the devil has created. And the reason why we continue to go down a false path is because we have not really deeply considered building alternative systems, education, politics, economics, build alternative systems. And until we begin to think like that, we will continue to have a certain perspective of the kingdom that I believe is not consistent on a broad level. That we will talk about next week. However, for today, what I want us to get into is the criticality of sight. We started talking about this several weeks ago, and I need for us to kind of look at this again because it's important, I believe. When we started looking at this a couple of weeks ago, we were in the book of Genesis chapter 15. And in Genesis chapter 15, we made the distinction between Lot's sight and Abraham's sight. Let me quickly read this and then we're going to expand on this. I'm going to repeat myself based on things I've said before. The objective is not for me to compete against what I've preached before. It is intended for us to at least arrive at a place of clarity. And if clarity means we rehearse certain concepts, clarify it, expand on it, then we'll do that. So let's run into this and hope that we can get to the end of this presentation. Now, Lot, who went with Abram, also had flocks and herds and tents. And the land could not sustain them while dwelling together, for their possessions were so great that they were not able to remain together. And there was a strife between the herdsmen of Abram's livestock and the herdsmen of Lot's livestock. Now the Canaanites and the Perizzites were dwelling then in the land. So Abram said to Lot, please, let there be no strife between you and me, nor between your herdsmen and between your herdsmen, my herdsmen and your herdsmen. For we are brothers. Is not the whole land before you? Please separate from me. If to the left, then I will go to the right. Or if to the right, then I will go to the left. And the scripture says further that Lot lifted up his own eyes. Verse 10, own there is my emphasis. Other translation does in fact say, another translation does say that Lot lifted up his own eyes and saw all the valleys of Jordan, that it was well watered everywhere. This was before the Lord destroyed Sodom and Gomorrah, like the garden of the Lord, like the land of Egypt as you go to Zoar. So Lot chose for himself all the valley of the Jordan, and Lot journeyed eastward. Thus they separated from each other. Abram settled in the land of Canaan, while Lot settled in the cities of the valley and moved his tents as far as Sodom. Now the men of Sodom were wicked exceedingly and sinners against the Lord. Now there are several principles about sight that we could underscore in Lot's operation. These are the principles we said. One, his perception was biased by his possession. That's an important point. His perception was biased by his possession. He was a guy of livestock. He was a man in agriculture. And so whatever he had, he made decisions based on his own possession. So he looked towards the land of Sodom and Gomorrah, and he saw it as a well-watered field. And he was making decisions based on the well-being of his flock. Now, take note of that point. I know that very often we've preached in our churches that God always uses what you have. And so if you have a rod, then God will use your rod. But listen, while that is a truth, God is not limited to only using what you have. And so a lot of us basically engage in the call of God and engage in ministry based on our own competence. And in doing so, we shut down the capability of the grace of God. God is not limited to work with you in areas of finances because you have a degree in finance. God is not limited to working with you in areas of childcare because you have a master's in childcare. If you only submit to God based on the areas of your possession, whatever those possessions may be, you are shutting down the movement of God in your own heart and life, and you are limiting your perception. Lot's issue was his perception was biased by his possession. Now, I want all of you to think about that in the administration of your call and how you are going about your separate responsibilities. There is something called the call of God. And the evidence of a klesis, the word klesis is the word in the Greek for a call. One of the evidence of a klesis is that it will take you way beyond the realm of your own competence. It will take you way beyond the realm of your own capability. Because let's face it, if God can only work within the confines of your ability, or rather, if you can only function out of the confines of your own ability, you don't need God for that. And so if I have to live within the limits of what I am able to do, I don't need God to take me beyond that. And so listen, the starting point of Lot's deception was his perception was biased by his possession. And that's a very important point I want you to get. He was a man of livestock, so he made a decision that was convenient to his possessions. Now, that word possession should be in inverted commas, because take that in the context of where you live as a leader and ask yourself the hard questions. Am I limiting the movement of God within my life to those areas that I feel most comfortable with? How much more should I lean into God to activate layers of my life that I am not aware of, I'm not comfortable with, I have no sense of discernment in those areas, but I'm going to lean into his grace. His perception was biased by his possession. We said also that his vision was self-induced. He lifted up his own eyes, the Bible said. He lifted up his own eyes and he chose for himself. It was self-induced. Any vision that is self-induced is not really a vision. That basically is a selfish pursuit of an objective, again, that is convenient to you. A self-induced vision is not a vision at all. Thirdly, we said his vision was myopic. He could not see beyond the immediate. His sight was only limited to that which was immediately within his gaze, that which was immediately within his grasp. And so he lifted up his eyes and looked, he grabbed a hold of that. Myopic. He was influenced by Sodom's present state and was blind to its future destruction and seduction. That's important. And so you again, as a leader in this conversation, you need to kind of drill into that and explore the many nuances inside of that and how it applies to where you live and where you live, to where you live and where you work. His vision was myopic. He could only see, he could not see beyond the immediate. He was influenced by Sodom's present state. He looked at Sodom and he called it a well-fertile field like the garden of God. You are dealing with massive layers of deception. His vision had distorted his reality. He was looking at something and that distorted his own reality. He looked at Sodom and called it the garden of God. That is Lot's deception. And ultimately, he was imprisoned by his own perception. And we know imprisonment for Lot literally meant he went down and he was held captive by the people of Sodom and Gomorrah. He was held captive by his own perception. And again, that happens in how we sometimes build our communities and how we build our vision. Sometimes you could lock yourself inside of the smallness of your own perception in all kinds of ways. You build your board and your elders and your deacon structures in such a way that you are answerable to them. You hold yourself almost in chains, incapable of making a decision in light of what God is saying to you, because you've imprisoned yourself inside the limits of what you've once seen. Now, what is at the core of this man's vision, at the core of Lot's perception? Lot was seen for himself. His perception was biased by his perspective. He was induced by his own vision. He had a distorted sense of reality. He was literally very myopic, looking only at what was in front of him. At the core of Lot's operation is one fundamental principle I want us to walk away with, and that is this: any earthly or carnal lens used to determine sight will have blind spots. And that is a very profound reality right there. But if you try to discover God through the lens of religion, then you are being blinded in certain areas. If you try to discover the reality of the kingdom through your American culture, through your Latin American culture, through your Caribbean culture, there are blind spots. If you try to look at it through your education, there are blind spots. Any earthly or carnal lens used to determine sight will have blind spots. And that's the reality you discover inside of Lot. And it's the reality that you have to discover within yourself, that you cannot depend on your education. You can't depend on the color of your skin, good, bad, or otherwise. You can't depend on your circle of friends and influence. You can't depend on the amount of money you have, the car you drive, your status. Any lens, any earthly or carnal lens used to determine sight will have blind spots. You're going to miss certain areas. Now, this is Abraham on the other hand. Abraham is this. It says in verse 14, and Lot said to Abram, after Lot left is critical. Lift up your eyes. This is God speaking to Abram. Lift up your eyes and look from where you are, north, south, east, and west. For all the land that you see, I will give you. Verse 18, then Abram moved his tent and came and dwelt in the plains of Mamre, which is in Hebron, and built there an altar unto the Lord. Several important points. And these points are almost like the flip side of what you see in Lot. What are those points? Number one, Abram's sight is activated with the amendment of his relational orbit. And that's a very important perspective, because very often what you see is determined by the hive mind that you create around you. Hive mind is almost like how bees live. Bees basically perceive, and that's the key word, they don't necessarily have natural sight because most bees are literally legally blind. But bees perceive by being hyper-connected to other bees. And that hyperconnectivity determines a certain level of awareness. And so very often your circle of influence determines the limit of your perception. So if you hang around a particular clique or you have a particular clip you run with, after a while, it basically kind of limits the way you see and what you see. You have to be constantly opening up your orbit to new friends, to new dialogue, to new conversation. And that is how the moment you begin to lock yourself into a certain kind of relationship and no one can get in and you can't get out, then you are creating the conditions for cultic operations. Let me say that again. The moment you lock your relationships in, no one can get in and no one can get out. You have basically put inside of your relational framework the ingredients for occultism and cultic operations. Abraham's sight is activated with the amendment of his relational orbit. You see there in verse 13 that God said to Abram after Lot left, some degree of amendment, some degree of input. I could say, as I've said before, just listening to some of the other brothers, Frederick, I only met Frederick a couple of months ago, but his contribution to this platform has opened up my perspective in all kinds of ways. I could have lived within the limits of my relationship and lock that in where I can't get out and no one can come in, and that thing becomes totally corrupt and crazy. The second thing about Abram is this: Abram's vision was not self-induced. The speaking of the Lord activated it. The moment the Lord said to Abram, lift up your eyes. The point you have to get there is accurate sight is indelibly aligned to the speaking of the Lord. If God does not speak, you cannot see. And that's an important point to write down. If God does not speak, you cannot see. I remind you of the Lot reality. If you try to discover by looking at any other lens except through that which God provided for you, you will have blind spots. You cannot see until God speaks. The Lord said to Abram, lift up your eyes. Accurate sight is indelibly aligned to the speaking of the Lord. Sight that the Lord activated is elevated and all-encompassing. When God activates sight, get those two words. God said, lift up your eyes and look east, west, north, and south. It is elevated, meaning it is on a higher plane than the norm, and it is all-encompassing. It is not myopic and limited to one particular zone. When God activates sight, it is elevated and all-encompassing. It is expansive in its view. It is elevated in its view. It is elevated and all-encompassing. The other thing you have to understand here, very simply, your perception determines your possession. Now, the reason why, that might sound almost like cliche, but remember, in describing Lot, Lot allowed his possession to bias his perception. Abraham, on the other hand, whatever he possessed was informed by what he saw. As far as your eyes can see, I will give to you. You cannot make decisions based on what you have. Sight determines the entire operation. Whatever is your perception is what will ultimately determine your possession. And that could speak to areas of your giftedness, areas of your competence, areas of your audience. It could speak of your reach of influence. Your perception determines your possession. Next, Abram saw, then he moved and built an altar. That's the basic principle you see in Abram. He saw, he moved, built an altar. He saw, he moved, built an altar. Fundamental principle. Sight is spiritual locomotion. Sight is what actually gives the velocity and certainty in your movement. Again, I say to you that if you don't have clear sight, I would strongly recommend that you tiptoe through the tulips, tiptoe into the next purpose, into the next dimension of God's purpose for your life. Don't ever assume bull in a china shop status on the basis of looking through a little peephole, and you have a limited level of perception, and you hope that the more you go is the more you see. That's how we live in this realm, that we go and hope that we see as we go. Abraham saw and then he went. Now, that's an important scenario right there. We assume that the more you go is the more you see. And so our position is go and God will allow you to see. Go further, he will allow you to see more. Abraham's position is see first and then go. And if you put that equation in the other way around, then you are setting yourself up for chaos. See first and then go. I know that sometimes there's this thing, the energy of the flesh, and sometimes the energy of our own egos can sometimes tell us, listen, let's bolt out and move forward. There is great accuracy in just being patient. Take your time. Sometimes it is safer to be slow and sure than to be hasty and chaotic. Sight is spiritual locomotion. And in that regard, if you read about these altars, every time an altar is built, an altar is a spiritual memorial of divine insight. Every time someone had a moment of remarkable insight, a moment of awareness, they'll build an altar. An altar is not a religious monument. It is a memorial of divine revelation. And so if you were to continue to walk with God for 3 years, 4 years, 5 years, and you are to utilize the Abrahamic concept, every time you see, you move. Every time you see, you move, but you move and build an altar. Then if you are to look back on your life after a period of time, then what you should see is a history populated with altars. And each altar represents a point which God spoke, a moment that activated a new level of movement, a moment that activated a new level of awareness, a moment that activated a new grasp of God. Now that is where effective and authoritative leadership exists. Leadership is not so much in how articulate you speak. It has a lot more to do with how accurate you see. And so your sight determines every single thing about your functionality. Remember I said, sight is spiritual locomotion. That's the stuff that gives you validity. It gives you velocity. It gives you certainty in your operation. If you are blind, you would stumble your way into the next thing in God, or you would sleepwalk into your future. And so leaders, particularly in the criticality of our times, cannot make decisions based on some little feeling that you're not too sure about. We have to be able to walk with a certain level of authority as we continue to develop a certain level of competence in our grasping of God and our sight of God. So let me rehearse some of these definitions, and I really would like to get to the end of this. There's quite a number of slides I have in this presentation because I kind of added quite a bit to it. So what is sight? I'm going to repeat quite a lot of what I said before. Sight is a clear Bible-based perception of life. Correct Bible-based perspective of life. That's important. It means the Word of God becomes the prism through which you look at life in front of you. You allow the Word of God to define it. And so remember I said earlier that if God does not speak, then you cannot see. And what you have in the Word of God is literally the speaking of God on the most basic level. And so you interpret, you look at life, and you apply the correct biblical position to whatever is in front of you. You cannot respond to life based on the biasness of the external impulses. And that's an important point. Most people define life based on all of the external biased impulses. And so you become a reed shaken by the wind because every external force is informing your internal perspective. And that's the wrong way to live. Sight is correct Bible-based perspective. Now, there are some of these definitions I really want to remind you of and drive home. Listen to me. Sight is correct, is complete alignment between your belief system and your lifestyle. Sight is when your belief and lifestyle are dynamically aligned. There's no gaps between what you believe and how you live. There's no schizophrenia there. There's no duality there. There's no duplicity there. There's no gaps between what you believe and how you live. Now, I know that sometimes you hear the voice of God today, and you have to almost allow that word to kind of marinate inside of your own heart and life before it gives you the authority to walk and the authority and confidence to apply. But the moment you hear and you defer to what you hear, and you may not necessarily apply it instantly, then that is of itself part of the alignment dynamic, because not everything you hear today you'll apply tomorrow. But at least the willingness to lean in and say yes to, the willingness to defer to and begin to lend your mind and all of your faculties to what you are hearing and to what you are being convinced of, that of itself is part of your commitment to complete alignment in your belief system and your lifestyle. Sight is the capacity to receive and apply communication from heaven. You know, I was doing this again today, and I really felt the need. A couple years ago, we had a prophetic school. And remember I said earlier that we'll have to do some detailing and maybe some master classes. I really felt the need for us to kind of pull back a little bit and maybe at some point do a master class on just hearing the voice of God. Doing a whole master class, some practicals. How do you hear the voice of God? Because it's a critical issue. The capacity to receive and apply communication from heaven is not just a prophetic component that lies in the gift or the office of a prophet. This ought to be the natural part of our daily operation. It's how we breathe, it's how we walk, how we think. It's just the natural, innate part of a believer, the capacity to receive and apply communication from heaven. Sight is reducing the latency between the realms. Latency is, I mentioned this last week, latency is the static and the little echoes you get whenever I speak to you on the phone. I am in one part of the world and I call you on my phone and I say hello, and maybe a millisecond after, I could still hear myself saying hello on the phone. That's latency. Technology and all of the dynamic new phones that are being created are designed to reduce the latency. So when I say hello from Trinidad and you are hearing me in Finland, there is no latency. It's immediate. Latency deals with the immediacy with which you hear what is being said. And so sight is reducing the latency between the realms where God speaks and we hear, removing the gaps between what God says and how you obey. Clear sight. Sight rather is clear insight into the true nature of surrounding reality. The true nature of surrounding reality. So much of what is in front of our gaze, it's a mirage, it's not real. And let me say this, something that I wanted to drill into this particular presentation today, but I refused to put it in, but I'm going to say it nonetheless. Clear sight allows you, or rather sight gives you clear insight into the true reality or the true nature of surrounding reality. Now, whatever creation you are determines the level of perception you have. Whatever creation you are determines the level of perception you have. Now, do you understand that we Homo sapiens, we have certain limits based on our literal eye? If you have to depend on your literal eye to inform all of your perception of reality in front of you, you will be blind. Homo sapiens have limitations there because our literal eyes are not designed to see through the darkness. Our literal eyes are not designed to see through haziness and cloudiness. Our literal eyes are not like eagles that has massive distance. They can see miles off. We don't have that. Whatever creation you are determines the level of perception you have. But this is important, that we are not mere humans. That sounds strange, but hear what Paul says. Paul said, listen, when there's envy and jealousy among you, are you not behaving like mere men, mere humans? Paul's perception is this, that it has mere humans and has us. We are not the average Homo sapiens. Why is that? Because we've been born again. The sad thing is that we have allocated or relegated being born again to a religious exercise where you walk to the front of the church and you rehearse the 3 spiritual laws. But when Jesus said, unless a man is born again, he cannot see the kingdom. Go back and take a look at the Greek word born again. The word literally means to be regened. To be regened is as though someone, when you respond to God, someone, that is God himself, by the power of the Spirit, enters into your literal DNA and re-engineers your DNA so you become a literal new creation, a new creature. You are no longer an average human being. Something inside of that regening mechanism ought to heighten us in all kinds of areas. We no longer live by 5 basic senses. We have other faculties available to us that heightens our ability to see around the bend, to look through certain circumstances and no longer live by the reality that is immediately in front of our gaze. Sight is clear insight into the true nature of surrounding reality. True nature of surrounding reality. There's so much in front of us that passes every day that we don't see, simply because we are still depending on the faculty of Homo sapiens to define it, to understand it, to interpret it. And sometimes your little poodle seeing stuff that you can't see. Your little pot-hung dog, if you're living in Trinidad, you understand what a pot-hung dog is. Your little pot-hung dog is aware of realities around you that you cannot see because you are still depending on the faculties of your Homo sapien status to define life in front of you. Clear sight is stepping beyond your Homo sapienism, if there's such a word, in order to grasp reality at a different plane. Now listen to me, because I'm going to expand on those definitions. Now this is something that really hits home to me. Sight is a hindsight view of a real-time circumstance. Now, to those of us who have prophetic capabilities, and you maybe walk in and you operate in the realm of the prophetic, this is something that you could understand, because there's something about the prophetic that gives you almost like a deja vu experience. When I say a hindsight view, it's as though you've seen it before. It's as though you've seen the past tense of something that is happening present tense. Let me say that again. It sounds confusing, but it is almost like you see the past tense of a present tense situation. It is as though you've seen this before. It's as though you step into a deja vu. So what is the power of stepping into that deja vu component, where it's as though I've seen this before? It arms you with a ninja-like response where you anticipate how things will be. You anticipate the outcomes. You know what's going to happen next. That is what sight is. Sight is a hindsight view of a real-time circumstance. It's as though you've seen this before. It's as though God arms you in advance to see things as they come in front of you. I'm sure some of you are familiar with the word provide. You know, we sing this song, Jehovah Jireh, our provider, and we think that provision, or when God provides, that he is just throwing natural stuff at us and meeting our needs. But the word provide is literally the word that I'm describing right here. The word provide means to see beforehand. That's the literal meaning of the word provide. Pro, before, and the word vide from video, to see beforehand. The God who provides, he only puts things in your path because he has seen the need long before the need basically arrived. Sight is a hindsight view of a real-time circumstance. That is such a powerful concept that if you could only capture it, it has the ability to give you what I call ninja-like precision in your response to circumstances in front of you. Because unlike the average man who's dealing with it and not know how to respond, you are stepping inside of the deja vu component of a real-time circumstance. Listen to me further. This also is one of those powerful principles that I needed to rehearse and remind you. Listen to me. Sight is slow motioning immediate events. Sight is slow motioning immediate events to allow you to see what is normally unnoticeable at real speed. Then you re-engineer your life to capture the granular parts and accurately respond to the details that are normally missed at normal speed. You need to read it again and understand it, because sight is slow motioning immediate events. It's as though you are stepping into the reality of the Matrix. I'm sure some of you seen the movie where Mr. Anderson is engaged in this fist fight with Keanu Reeves. And I mean, if it goes at real time, the thing goes at lightning fast. Those hands are moving at lightning fast speeds. But every now and again, for you to understand the speed at which these guys are operating inside of this matrix, it is so fast, they slow it down. And you can see the hand movement at a slow speed, and everyone is anticipating the movement at a dynamic pace. Slow motioning immediate events. And I told you in our last presentation that this particular concept, it happens in this life, particularly among individuals who are having a stroke, at the onset of a stroke. Most individuals, science says that most individuals begin to see things at slow speeds. So a glass is falling out of your hand, that glass is going down at a slow speed, because at the point of a stroke, it is as though your brain is trying to rewire itself because certain parts of it are now about to shut down. Now, God forbid any one of us have to live in this particular reality by depending upon a stroke. God forbid, we don't want that to happen to you at all. But the spiritual reality is equally important. Sight is slow motioning events to allow you to see what is normally unnoticeable at slow speed, at real speed. Then you re-engineer life to capture the granular parts and accurately respond to the details that are normally missed at normal speed. That is something that must be written down and captured. What it means, it declutters life. It declutters life and allowing us to see the unhindered pathways despite the obstacles and all the labyrinth. That is such a powerful concept. Now, that is something that I wrote down, and it's something that I've discovered, but I'm trying to discover it all over again. Because I've seen it happen in my own life. What I want is the technology to make this an everyday reality, that I perceive life and live life on a particular plane. Listen to me. Sight is God's perspective of an overwhelming reality. It is prophetic awareness inside of the prevailing madness. Now, let me give you one other definition. I'm going to stop. This is something we said the last time we were together, that sight is deliberate blindness to the excessive and unnecessary, and it is a fixed and immovable gaze on the critically important, and I call it the B technology. What is the B technology? B technology is sight that is specific to call, purpose, and responsibility, that is never distracted by the attractive. Bees are legally blind. Bees are legally blind. They only have sight for a flower. A bee cannot see anything else except flower and pollen. Why? God reduced a bee's perspective and made it only applicable to that which is consistent with its purpose. The bee is not distracted by anything else. Now, that has a profound reality upon how you live and think. Because if you apply the bee technology, where I don't care how beautiful, how sexy, how attractive, how amazing the work you are doing, I could applaud, I could celebrate it, but I'm not distracted by it. Because my sight, and this is something we have to respect and regard, my sight must be fixed on that which is specific to my call, my purpose, and my responsibility. And the reason why I could respect, let's say, a Dave Cropper is because he is equally living in that zone. And I could respect a Charles Opio or a PV because they are living in that same zone. They're not being distracted by every single pixie dust spiritual operation, things that glitter and looking fancy and how things are being done in different operations. You need to live in that bee technology where your sight is specific to your purpose. The bees exist to pollinate, and the bees exist to create wax and honey. That's what a bee exists for. Create wax, honey, and to help pollinate. And the bee only has sight that is specific to those areas. Nothing else is attractive. There's no distraction. There's no being pulled away in all kinds of different tangents. That's where it lives. Now, that is what we said the last time we were together. And we got down, I think we got to this, didn't we? Yeah, I think we did. But let's get into one last concept, and then we're going to stop. We ain't going to finish this, definitely won't. This is Leviticus 21. I'm going to get through this, and we're going to stop. And next week, I won't get back into this presentation. What I'm going to do, Kelvin Mohammed normally sends out both the slides and the audio. What I'm going to do, I'm going to put all the slides of this presentation, make it all available to you. So even those parts that I did not get into, you're going to have those slides. And so next week, we will not be coming back to these issues of sight because I'm always tempted to go back, revisit, rehearse, remind, and we will always be talking and building and going further. So I'm going to send the slides out and you can pick it up and use it, right? Leviticus 21. I'll take about another 10 minutes and then I'm going to open up. Leviticus 21, 16 to 21. This is the NIV translation. The Lord said to Moses, say to Aaron, for the generations to come, none of your descendants who has a defect may come near to offer the food of his God. No man who has any defect may come near. No man who is blind or lame, disfigured or deformed, no man who is with a crippled foot or hand, or who is hunchback or dwarf, or who has any eye defect, or who has festering sores or running sores or damaged testicles. No descendant of Aaron the priest who has any defect is to come near to present the food offering to the Lord. He has a defect, he must not come near to offer food of his God. Simple scriptures, we are all familiar with this, but I want to underscore about 2 points here. Point number 1, qualification for service is not based on the lottery of birth, ethnicity, geography, or lineage. Qualification in God's word, qualification for service. Now, remember, God is speaking to Levi, the sons of Levi. These people are born out of the lineage of Levi. They have Levi's blood coursing through their veins. They were born to be priests, as it were. But though born to be priests, God lists a whole bunch of disqualifications. In other words, Levi could be a father, but you're disqualified. You could come from the line of Abraham, but you're disqualified. Fundamental principle, qualification for service is not based on the lottery of birth. It's not based on the lottery of ethnicity, geography, or lineage, meaning every single one of us, we have an opportunity here. The kingdom does not operate by hereditary aristocracy. The kingdom doesn't operate. In the kingdom, there's no such thing called blue-blooded. The kingdom does not operate by hereditary aristocracy, but meritocracy still prevails despite having God as their father and we being his heir. Meritocracy means that you function based on merit, and very often merit has little to do with how much gifting you have, but has a great deal to do with how much gifting you lean into in order to get. Now, the list is quite simple. Anyone who's blind, lame, disfigured, deformed, crippled foot, crippled hands, hunchback, dwarf, eye defect, running sore, damaged testicle. That's a very exhaustive list. But you'd realize in this list, the emphasis, blindness speaks to no vision. Lame speaks to too dependent on others. Disfigured, you're just totally unattractive. Unattractive means that you don't appeal, nothing comes to you. Now, if you have a ministry and there's nothing coming to you, there's no attraction, then that is the equivalent of being disfigured. There's no attraction, you are unattractive. Unattractive doesn't mean that you're ugly, it's just nothing is drawn to you. Nothing is drawn to what you carry. Deformed, internally twisted, skeletally warped. Internally twisted is as though you walk around with all kinds of egotistical stuff and you want to pursue your own agenda. You are hoping that you'll be great and that you have all of this internally twisted agenda. You are skeletally warped. Then you are disqualified because you are considered deformed. Crippled feet, you are poor in execution, poor in application, and poor in doing. Feet in scripture always deals with doings and movings and applying and executing. And so crippled feet means you are poor in executing, poor in applying, poor in doing. Crippled hand means that you're selfish, unsupportive, uncaring. People are there with need and you really don't care. You're just uncaring, unsupportive, and just selfish. There's no empathy that marks your ministry. Next, hunchback. Hunchback, you are just bent on looking down. A hunchback, they're twisted and their gaze is constantly downward. Dwarf means that they're stunting your growth. There's arrested development. There's no more development. You've been going well and then suddenly there's no more growth taking place in your own life. There's a stunt in your growth. Arrested development now defines your ministry. Eye defect, you have a critical spirit. Critical spirit. Running sore means that there's dietary deficiencies. You know, in some translations it says there's scurvy. Do you know that when most of those conquistadors and most of the settlers who came to the New World, the Caribbean and the Americas and Latin America, when they came, almost all of the sailors were suffering from scurvy. Their flesh was falling apart as they lived on the boat for how much months. And the first thing that the Indians down here did, gave them oranges, gave them oranges. In other words, what they were lacking was just some vitamin C. And so when it talks about running sores or scurvy, dietary deficiency, you're living on a single diet of faith. Well, every single Sunday morning, faith and faith, or you're living on a single diet of just Jesus loves you. He just loves you. Your diet is not as expansive. It doesn't cover all of the appropriate spiritual food groups. And so you have a running sore. Your flesh, your spirit is weak because you are living on a diet that does not cover as much as possible, and damaged testicles just being totally unproductive and sterile. Now, look at that list, and I'm going to stop right here. Look at that list and you realize that the emphasis, there's one area that shows up almost in two different ways. One, you are blind. Blindness speaks about no vision. And two, you realize that the third to the bottom is an eye defect. Blind and eye defect. It is the one area that basically shows up, one particular part that shows up twice. Blind or an eye defect. An eye defect is a critical spirit. And you know, like Jesus said that you fail to recognize the plank in your own eye, but you want to take a speck out of another man's eye. You know, one of the things that I've said in terms of effectively building in 2022, you building in ministry, building your operation, it is critically important. Dispense of criticizing others. It is of no value. It brings no value to you. Some people operate with a divide and conquer mentality. That the more I diminish another man's operation, then it's the more I could assert myself as being the standard. That model does not work. I've been around ministries who live there, that in order for them to assert that they are so grand and powerful, they have to identify the weakness in others. That is not beneficial to nothing that we do. A man with a critical spirit is basically living in a world of limited perception and limited sight. If you believe that the only way that you could be perceived as having such grand sight is to pluck out the eyes of everybody else, then something is wrong with your understanding of God and your understanding of the kingdom. And so the point that is very clear, of all the disqualifications, two of them are site-specific. Two of them are site-specific, and that's important. The emphasis there is that, listen, you're a man of God, let's get our site in place. And right there, my time, I'm going to stop right there because I want to get some of your feedback. I want to get some of your input. But I'm no longer going to get back to this particular topic unless there is a serious impulse from the Lord. Then we're going to jump beginning next week, looking at other matters. But let's open up the line and let me hear what you have heard. What have you heard? So I'm going to close this presentation and I'm going to listen to you now. Who would be first? What have you heard? What have you heard? Kind of quiet in this Presbyterian church, you know. I think is everything. I see Pavy, your hand is up. Yeah, Pavy, you could unmute and you could make a contribution.
Yes, thank you. Thank you very much. We have in Finnish Bible an interesting translation for Lot starting to come from Egypt to Sodom. In Genesis 13 verse 12, it says that Lot kept on moving his tents closer and closer to Sodom, and that explained why his sight started to be corrupted, because as the word is saying, that if you are faithful or unfaithful in small things, you will be that in bigger and bigger things, and that's what happened to Lot, and can happen to us also, is if we start moving our tents closer and closer to the world, the ways of the world. And also I'm thinking about keeping the sight in the Lord is also that we have to keep ourselves independent in certain measure from churches, denominations, spiritual leaders, in order to have the freedom to grow in all things into the Lord, who is the head. That of course means the word also, and came to my mind about David when he was anointed to be king, and he was going to Jerusalem. There was those crippled and blind ones who said, "You don't come here," and that gives us the also what the Bible is saying about Jerusalem, that it was all in a mess. And if we think about Israel, Jerusalem, Zion, being the fleshly believers, soulish or spiritual, so Jerusalem is a mixture of all kind of things, and that's why we need to open the path to the Zion and to the Lord and to the word, and keep ourselves so that we can see. So
beautiful,
that's
beautiful. I like the Finnish translation, how he took his tent closer and closer, because instead of that, the closer he moves towards Sodom, is the further removed he is from the clarity of God. And so it's almost incremental, and that I think is a dangerous side of it, that people don't arrive into deception overnight, that nobody goes from 0 to 100. You don't go from 0 to 100 instantly. In the spirit realm, it doesn't go like that at all. You gradually move to a place of deception and blindness, gradually. And basically what you're seeing in Lot from the Finnish translation, move the tent little by little by little. And so sometimes you could start off right and end up badly. And that is an incremental movement. Nobody goes from 0 to 100 in an instant. You know, it's like when Moses, or rather Aaron, tried to convince Moses of the people's backsliding. He said, you know, I just put the gold in and the calf walked out. It doesn't work like that. 0 to 100, don't work like that. You don't ever put the gold in and a calf just walked out. Never works like that. I like that Finnish translation. I will take note of that. He moved his tent little by little to Sodom. Good point. Good point. Excellent. Thanks, Davey. Thank you. I see, Ivan, you have your mic on. Before let me ask you, Ivan, to kind of make a contribution, because you may be on the road. From what I heard earlier, you were on the road. Didn't sound as though you were in front of a comfortable. So I'm going to take your contribution first, then give Joel the mic soon after. Yeah, Ivan, shoot.
I like your reference to the cuckoo bird and the possibility that we may be building on kind of man-made what the kingdom looks like, and there's an important distinction between that and what the kingdom is.
Right. You see, but Ivan, you're jumping ahead of me already.
We need
Because
to
I
be
guess
very, very careful what we define as the kingdom of God.
beautiful. But that was just actually just creating a sample, almost like giving a preview, because I really am convinced that most of us are doing the cuckoo thing. That from our perspective, we see the kingdom as, okay, let me go and plant my eggs inside of the education system that currently exists. And that's how we are taking over the kingdom and bringing the kingdom to bear, or plant our eggs in the whatever. But little do we ever stop and think that, okay, why not build an alternative economic system? Here's an example. Most of us are convinced that our eschatology is saying that the end times will be brought about by us not being able to buy or sell unless we have the mark of the beast. It means that the economic systems of the end times will be strongly dependent on the Babylonian model. Babylon will define the economic model of the end times. Now, we could build a whole eschatology around it and say, well, we have to, Jesus has to come pre-trib so that we could escape that, or maybe we could just barely make it post-trib, and our whole eschatology is built around the mark of the beast and buying or selling. Why can't we redefine that? That we don't have to buy or sell depending on the mark of the beast, because we are not, or rather we have not been investing our kingdom efforts into cuckoo exercises, putting our planting or rather putting our eggs inside of a nest that is not God. If we build an alternative economic model, then the end times, I'm going to use the language of most people, the end times that is dependent on a Babylonian model will not affect us, because we already built an alternative economic model that is not dependent on the mark of the beast. That's a different perspective altogether. Different perspective. So yeah, Ivan, good point. I think you're already jumping into a future conversation, but that's good. You grabbed onto that. That's good. Okay, Joel, let me ask you to kind of make your point, and then I'm going to ask, Cropper is still on the line? Dave is still there? Cropper, are you still there? I'm going to scroll through here. Okay, yeah, Joel, shoot.
I just wanted to touch on the hindsight perspective that you were sharing, that lens on prophecy. I think spiritual sight is the only way we can ever actually have real-time perception of what is happening in the world. Everything, as a matter of fact, that we see and perceive is not real time, because when you think about the light that has to travel on an object and then leave that object to reach to your light, there is a latency, there is a delay. So you look at stars and you're looking at information sometimes thousands of years old, because that the color that you're seeing of that star is how that star was 1,000 years ago. So I think our human senses and cognitive abilities could only ever give us a delayed view and limited sense of things that are happening. So spiritual sight is very important. And tying into that, I like how it talks about the different, how you spoke about the different appetites. And I think the appetites have different capacities. I think because Peter talks about, it being from milk, the milk of the word, and then it goes on to eating meat afterwards. So I think we need to, hear more, which will allow us to see more and will allow us to actually function at the real time, the Kairos moments that we tap into. So that's my
very good, very good. Let me ask. I wanted to I see Mark at Beko is on the line. Mark is a prophet out in Ghana, and so some of these concepts about sight could be very, very applicable. Not could be, but they are very applicable to his own functionality as a prophet. Maybe Mark, you want to kind of take the mic for a second and maybe give us a sense as to how this land and how you hear it. What are some of the values you could pick out of this, and maybe expand on it where necessary, that we could all hear or Sisamo. Mark, you there? Hoping that you have a good microphone where you are. Mark, if Mark did not jump on, it means that Mark maybe has a bad microphone on his end. Okay, Mark is not there. Mark is gone. Okay. He's not hearing me. All right, anyone else want to jump on there and have a contribute to that? Okay, David, mic is yours, David.
Thank you. I want to go back to where you started in Genesis, where you said what Lot, he chose according to his possessions.
Mm-hmm.
He was looking out for what he had in his, he had already accomplished, and it was very obvious that he had one perspective of what the future was for him. And so when he was given the opportunity to choose, his sight was, oh, I want something where my cattle and my animals can have water and good grass. And that, so he picked according to his possessions. It's interesting that in the book of Hebrews in chapter 11, it says that Abram or Abraham, he felt as a stranger and as an alien in the promised land. And it says there because he was looking for the city which builder and architect is God. Now you see the total difference. Abram's eyes and his sight has nothing to do with what he owns or what he has, but Abram's sight is on God's purpose. It's on what am I here on this earth for in relationship to God? And in Abram, as what the book of Hebrews says to us, he was a stranger and an alien in the midst of a lot of enrichment, blessing, and possession, because he had a lot of it. But he said, I'm an alien, I'm a stranger, because what I'm in my sight, I'm looking for something that is greater than this. And what was greater was God's eternal purpose. I believe that teaches us something powerful. And I really thank you for bringing the quote there in Genesis and pointing out Lot's way and perspective on how he chose. I believe that many of us in the past and many of us today in ministry, we have a tendency to have the Lot eyes and not the Abraham eyes. And the only way that we can have the Abraham eyes is we have to have an understanding that we're not here for me, we're here to be vessels for God's eternal purpose, God's eternal purpose. And that is to establish his kingdom according to his architect and his design. And I believe that if we think a little bit on that, going back to how you started today, and with the whole concept that you shared about sight and the different aspects of it, I think it helps us to refocus, helps us to, all right, what am I looking, as I look out at my horizon ahead of me, what am I looking for? Increase what I have, protect what I have, supply and nourish what I have, or is there something greater that I need to be looking for? And I believe that we're living the moment and the time when God is calling us to have a sight for his eternal purpose, for that city that he is the architect and builder.
Well, thank you, David. Great insight as always. And we're going to continue on. We're going to look at, Charles Opio, we see your hand up. Welcome, Charles. Thank you. The mic is open.
Thank you, Kelvin. I just wanted to make a comment on the basis that it's absolutely amazing that the criticality of Lot's intervention, in the sense that Abraham clearly hears God when he leaves Ur of the Chaldees. And it's significant that God doesn't speak to him again until Lot departs, which then talks about the power of certain associations or relationships canceling out the sound of the voice of God, in the sense that Lot wasn't an enemy. Lot was family. And so how easily that can step into the space that then kind of creates this gap where we don't hear until we adjust and then begin to hear again.
That's very significant. Oftentimes we get clouded by even family associations and those type of things, and associations that we hold so dear. But we see how God strategically speaks and opens our eyes into certain things. I think Andy was making a point about once God spoke, someone saw. He saw. Once God spoke, he saw. And there's something definitely powerful about that. And then too, the patience inside of sight and how important that is. So very great comments as always, Charles. Thank you very much for that. Very, very insightful. Kelvin Muhammad, I see your hand is up. Kelvin, the mic is yours.
Yeah, just a brief comment, and again, greetings to everyone. This was a particularly insightful teaching today, and I want to repeat what you have said and what Andy has said, that what God says predicates what we see. He said, what we see is definitely hinged on and predicated on what we hear. The quality of our revelation determines the nature of our sight. And I want to say that again. Sometimes the quality of our revelation determines the nature of our sight. And when God shows us something, it has been my experience, especially when he shows you something new, is an indication of where he's going next. And it is also an invitation to partner with him. This situation with Abraham was not the first time this happened. Abraham actually had about 7 separations. And on each occasion, he had to hear God afresh. And that's challenging, but it's also refreshing. It tells me something about the heart of Abraham, that even though he was taken to new territories, even though he was taken to new experiences, he never settled. His heart was always set on journeying, always on journeying, even when it meant separating from Lot, which was really a separation from money. That's what it was, because Lot took the best of the land, but still God was the one that prospered him. So this is a particularly insightful, and it is educational, it is informative as to the doings of God, but also how our heart needs to be postured when God speaks. Yeah, blessings all. Those are my thoughts.
Indeed, thank you.
Kelvin, do you mind if I just come in at the end a little bit?
Please do.
I want to kind of cover a little bit about the influence, the other way, about the influence of Abraham on Lot. You know, we all know that from Abraham's original calling, he took Lot with him. And we also know that Abraham went down to Egypt. And we also know he came out with great wealth, but he also came out with an Egyptian and the challenges that came out from there. And I think that we have to look at the other side of things, which is Abraham's desperate intercession for Lot, which I believe was not just because he was family, but because he felt that he had taken Lot on this journey with him. And the end of Lot is such that it's desperate for Abraham because he's played a part in this. And so I think there's a balance to be struck where we see God's mercy in bringing Abraham from promise to possession, but at the same time, Abraham having to deal with the full reality of the impact of his life on another person. I completely in accord with what David said, because that was the thing that was on my mind, that what kept Abraham's focus and direction was this idea of the promise in terms of both land, the legacy in Genesis 15, in terms of looking at the stars, and then the city of God and its foundations, which would have helped to keep him from staying too long in any city state in that time. I also think that Abraham, fortunately, by walking with the Lord, would have had an insight historically into what the map was going to be like in that particular region, how it was going to be played out, and knowing that his legacy was going to go into slavery, knowing that his legacy was going to come out the other side. These are the things that really dictated the way he pitched his tent. So it wasn't just about the way he moved through the land, but the way he pitched. There was an understanding that he had, dictated by his view of the city of God, that meant he was prepared to sacrifice, suffer, and circumcise himself in order to ensure that he played his part in this covenant through which he relied solely on the Lord to bring to fruition. But I'd land on that pain in his own intercession for Lot and the situation in Sodom and Gomorrah, and knowing that he would have played a part in the end of a member of his family.
Interesting balance there, Frederick. Anyone else like to speak to that particular point? Abraham's side. Very insightful. That's what we do in this conversation. We want to be able to see both sides and to be able to balance, see what the word is saying as we widen the aperture. Charles, back to you.
Absolutely. Thanks, Kelvin. I just want to pick up off of what Frederick Tobin has said, is that it's profound. Certain things that you grasp with, like fast forward into the story, and we find a scenario where Lot has raised virgin daughters in Sodom. I mean, stuff you wouldn't even know how to deal with, meaning there was an impact on his relationship with Abraham that definitely must have stayed within his context, even though he was within Sodom. Just a few thoughts.
You know, there's so much here that we can unravel and looking at more as the aperture is being widened inside of this. You know, I just see the importance of sight. I know it's critical in the presentation that Anderson did, but as we continue to unfold this and look into layers of it, I just see in my own instance how vital that my sight is synchronized, should be synchronized to what God is actually showing. I know there are times that, you know, people see things that, you know, are not accurate. Sometimes there are false manifestations of things, but to be able to be synchronized to the side of God is my cry today as a result of what we've heard here. Deeply insightful, deeply insightful. Is there anyone else? Martin from Jamaica, Martin Ellis from Jamaica. Welcome to the Global Conversation.
Good day, everyone. Sir Kelvin, really want to thank you, sir, for hosting this. I was a little bit in and out, but still get to catch the end of Anderson's presentation. And just want to say that it's just a world, an entire world that has been opened up to me as I listen. As it regards to Abraham, what he did, Lot, him taking Lot with him, and how all of that unfolded itself. Yet still, and as I listen to Brother Charles elaborate about Lot being able to raise virgin daughters in Sodom, I'm thinking also of Abraham getting the word, the initial word, and with all of the other things that he had to fight, going down into Egypt, coming back out with an Egyptian child that, of course, we know all of the involvement with that, and how that, even up to this day, still the ripples of that, but yet still Abraham still managed to fulfill and managed to keep the covenant that God made with him initially, and becoming the father of the nations, and just putting together all the different dynamics of how all of this playing out is really, as you said, Sir Kelvin, about insightful, really getting a fresh eyes and a fresh understanding of the Word of God. It is so, it's like being in a purification thing, and the Word going through you and literally purging you, draining out the toxicity of religion and culture and all of that contaminants that most of us would have been through for years and years. It is just really profound, really powerful. And again, I really want to thank you, brother, because this is really changing our lives, really, really changing our lives. So bless you, sir, and blessings to everyone on.
Great to have you on. Hello.
Hi, Mark. Big up, my brother. Long time we don't talk. Mr. Baker.
Yes. All right. Brenda, do you have a comment?
Yeah, just right quick. I just wanted to say this teaching that Anderson has done on the criticalness of sight reminds me of God's conversation with Jeremiah when he was asking him, what did he see? And Jeremiah said, I see a branch of an olive tree. And then the Lord said to him, you have seen well. And so, it just lightened up the fact that when we see well, that's when the Lord performs his word. The divine alignment of his sight and our sight.
Right. Excellent. Excellent. Muriel, I see your hand up. Comments from you, Muriel?
Yes, I just want to say that I just wanted to share about the teaching, the part that really actually it just unraveled and extend my worship today is about when Pastor Anderson spoke about the altar and what the altar really means. It's a memorial to God's blessing, and that every time Abraham was blessed by God, that he built another altar. And it just, as I was listening to that, it just increased my worship, even as I began to receive that, because sometimes I believe that we limit ourselves and we limit our worship and we don't see. And, we're talking about seeing today and in leadership and having accuracy and just knowing that, the altar, every time God bless me, I'm supposed to build an altar unto him. It was really powerful for me today in my sight and, going forward in some implementations of leadership. So I just want to be thankful for that today as well, and to just, reiterate that.
Thank you, Muriel. Always good to have you on. Thank you for your comments there. I'm going to have to go back over the whole, just what Anderson taught, then also the feedback, because there's a lot here to chew on. I'm thinking so much about going back to what Charles Appeal said about raising daughters, as Martin mentioned, in that particular culture. It's I'm starting to see the safety that there is in sight, divine sight, and the safety that's there, and then also the protection and just so many things, the grace, the ability inside of being synchronized with God's sight. So I'm just really really grateful. Listen, we're going to get going because we have
Kelvin.
Yes.
I just want to make one more quick point. What just struck me, and it's so amazing, is the capacity that the early fathers would have had to keep the word of God, as you mentioned again, the ability that Lot had, or however he found it, to grow virgin daughters, whatever the climate was and whatever was happening, he managed to have virgin daughters in that environment. But we saw the same thing with Joseph when he went to Egypt. When he went to Egypt and him being down there for however long as a slave, but then he carried something was imparted and deposited in him that he still kept himself, so that when Bathsheba, Potiphar's wife attacked him, he said, I can't do this thing. So what I'm saying is the ability that these fathers had, even though they messed up in different ways, but they carried and they imparted something. And then you saw the grace and the ability to carry it even when they're away from their general or their normal environment. And that really stood out to me in a really powerful way. So wanted to mention that quickly, sir.
Thank you, Martin. Thank you. And the good news is that that grace and that ability is still available to us and even beyond, to us today and even beyond. So thank you, everyone, for your contribution and for your attendance and participation here on the Global Kingdom Conversation. Anderson, something happened with his Wi-Fi or internet connection. I believe it was that powerful teaching he delivered. Everything just combusted all around him. So he's unable to return. It is that severe. So, but he's well. But we're going to talk to you next week, Thursday, at the same time, 1 p.m. Eastern, 10 a.m. Pacific time. And thank you very much for your participation. Have a wonderful, wonderful week. Thank you all.
Shalom,
God
everyone.
bless.
Shalom.
Shalom.
Bye, everyone.